Hello again and welcome back to The Front Row, a minor production of the First Congregational Church in South Pekin, where our intent is to bring snippets from our Sunday morning message into your week. And this week, of course, it is Holy Week leading up to Easter Sunday, but we are peeling back the onion a little bit on the spiritual discipline of study. A couple of days ago, we talked about why study is so important. Yesterday, we dipped our toes into the how, but hopefully, if anything, it was a teaser encouraging us all to learn more about how to study better, because quite often, I know in my own life, I was not really taught how to study well, and there are some components to it that are important for us to understand. So yesterday, we dipped into that world of how, and today I want to really quickly talk about what. What do we study? What do we look at deeply so that we can consciously direct our mind in a particular direction? And there are two categories of things that we can study. First, the verbal. And the verbal includes anything that is spoken or written, things that we can articulate with our ears or with our mind's eye, our mind's ear. And that would be, of course, in the pursuit of Christ-likeness and of God, that would be one of the primary things that we would want to study in the verbal space would be God's Word. Okay, we're gonna really dig into what is God saying in the text. We want to bring in maybe some commentary to understand a little bit more about the situation that's going on, so we can understand the culture within which this was all happening. So, of course, the Bible is a primary, but then again, we've got those commentaries. We have church fathers that have written some amazing, deep things that can influence our hearts and minds, that can bring about transformation by the renewing of our minds, setting us in a particular direction. All of that, podcasts, webinars, articles, newspapers, periodicals, whatever, all of that falls under the verbal space of study. But then we've got the nonverbal. If you go back to your Communication 101 days, a vast majority of the world exists there. We got about 10, 20% in the verbal space. 80, 90% of communication happens in the nonverbal space. And are we taking time to study? To study human relations and how we interact. To study the way that people think. And then to study the way that we think and we process and we interact with the world. And to understand it before we evaluate it. That goes a little bit back into the how from yesterday. But it's really important that we not make a snap judgment early and then be blinded to the truth that might be hidden in there. In order for us to get to some hidden truth, particularly in the nonverbal space, but also in the verbal, but particularly here, we have to push aside our temptation to snap judgment and observe what's really going on here. How are things interacting? How is the world actually working? So in the nonverbal space, human relations, our own self, but then you've got kind of in the macro, how does the world work? How do cultures work? How do cultures interact? Why does our culture elevate X and denigrate Y? And only through some sort of study can we appreciate the truths that are impacting that. Then we can evaluate it and then we can try and have an influence on it. But if we don't understand the basic truths that are supporting and influencing why the world works in that way, then we can have very little effect on changing those things. So what do we study? We study verbal and we study the nonverbal world. Now, of course, in the spiritual discipline of things, this is all within the context of wanting to grow in our knowledge and understanding of God and His creation, the way it all works. So it really does ultimately envelop everything. Now, these methodologies, this idea, this concept, this discipline of study can be applied across all kinds of stuff. We can be disciplined in our study of our vocation, of our spouse, of a particular hobby. But of course, in our conversation, we want to draw it really all back to the spiritual discipline of becoming more like Christ, understanding God in the way that He calls us to live this life. And then as a result of that, redirecting our mind, our heart, and our actions, being transformed by the renewing of our minds so that we can understand His will, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Again, this series comes in the midst of Holy Week and our anticipation of Easter, probably being published on Good Friday. So I hope that we can embrace the greater spirit of all that's going on this week, but not miss out on our understanding, our growing understanding of the spiritual disciplines. Of course, this week being the spiritual discipline of study. Blessings to you. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Have a great Easter weekend, and hope to see you guys, many of you anyway, on Sunday. Blessings to you. Bye-bye for now.